You said that Anita Pfaff has sought to discuss her wish to bring her father's remains to India with Prime Minister Modi, but Modi has not responded. Tell me more about that.
Yes, she has written letters more than once to Narendra Modi. Not once has he even acknowledged these letters, let alone provided a proper answer. So that tells you again the attitude of the government of India.
Hi, I'm Karan Thapar. Over the last few years, I hope you've been watching my program, The Interview on the Wire. During that period, I've interviewed doctors, politicians, businessmen, scientists, authors, and even the occasional Nobel laureate. For me, it's been exciting. I hope it's been enjoyable for you. But these, as you know, are tough times, and if this program is going to remain bold, independent, and sometimes even defiant, then I think we need your support. At the end of the day, it's a truism, but editorial independence is best defended by the viewers. So if you would like this program to remain the way it is, forthright, outspoken, and interesting, then would you consider supporting us? All you have to do is to click on the description at the bottom. But more than anything else, I hope you will continue to watch the interview. Your viewership means an awful lot to me.
Hello and welcome to a special interview for The Wire. Monday, the 18th of August, is the 80th anniversary of the death of Netaji Subhas Chandra Bose. But even now, his ashes remain at the Renkoji temple in Tokyo and have not been brought to India. This is despite the fact his daughter, Anita Pfaff, is very keen they should be brought home and immersed in the Ganges. So today we ask, what's holding this up and why? Joining me from London is Netaji's great-nephew, the author of Laid to Rest, the journalist Ashis Ray. Ashis Ray, Monday the 18th of August will be the 80th death anniversary of Subhash Chandra Bose. You believe this is the right moment for his cremated remains to be brought back to India from the Renkoji temple in Tokyo, where they've been kept since 1951. Can you start by explaining to the audience in India why have his remains not been brought back earlier?
Well, I would say, first of all, that it's better late than never. It They have remained at Renkoji Temple, as a matter of fact, since September of 1945. Since 1951, Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru instructed the then Indian consulate in Tokyo to look after the remains and, in fact, pay for the preservation. And that has remained the case ever since. Government after government in India have followed suit. Now, the question is, why am I asking for it now? For many years, his daughter, his only child, his only heir, Professor Anita Pfaff, has been asking for the remains to be transferred to India for what she calls a final disposal. And her argument is twofold. First, she says that her father's ambition was to return to a free India. This did not happen because he died as a result of a plane crash at Taipei on the 18th of August 1945. Thereafter, she says, since he was a Hindu, his remains ought to be immersed in the river Ganga. Now, that being the case, the government in India, which was good enough, I would venture to say, to open all files pertaining to Subhash Bose in the possession of the government of India, in other words, declassify all files, which ratified that he did indeed die as a result of the plane crash, and that the remains that have been preserved at Renkoji Temple, Tokyo, since 1945 are his. So, that being the case, what is preventing the government of India from paving the way for the return, I would say, for the transfer of the remains to India?
This is, in a sense, the intriguing key question. Now, Bose died without a will, which presumably means that the laws of intestacy apply to his remains. Therefore, why can't his daughter Anita Pfaff claim his remains and bring them to India? What prevents her doing that?
Factually, nothing prevents her from opting for the route that you're advocating, and you're absolutely right about the law which refers to priority of intestacy. And I'll come to that in a moment. It's just the goodness of the person that has prevented her from being proactive in this manner to cause embarrassment to the government of India. And let me just read this, because this priority of intestacy, which is originally an Anglo-Saxon concept and in Anglo-Saxon law, is very much part of the Indian Succession Act. And in that, let me just say this, the 2 points which are relevant. One is, in the event of the death of a person who hasn't left a will, which, as you correctly pointed out, is the case as far as Subhash Bose is concerned, and I quote, "A surviving spouse or civil partner is first in line," unquote. And then it goes on to say, quote, "Next in line will be the deceased person's children," unquote. So what have we got now? Netaji's wife passed away in 1996. Anita Bose Pfaff is the only child, the only heir. And she has been recognized as such for decades. First of all, after her birth was registered at the Indian consulate in Vienna as the daughter of Subhash Bose. Secondly, she holds an overseas citizen of India card on the basis of being the daughter of Subhash Chandra Bose. So the government of India fully recognizes the fact that she is indeed the daughter and sole heir of Subhash Bose. Now, she can very well serve notice on the government of India. She can very well serve notice on the government of Japan, because they have been blocking the transfer of the remains to India, and they have absolutely no right to do so. The rights as far as the remains are concerned rest entirely with Professor Anita Bose Pfaff.
You know, this is very interesting. I'm going to quote at this moment from an article that you wrote for The Wire in 2024. There you talk directly about the arrangement or understanding or agreement between the governments of India and the governments of Japan regarding Subhash Chandra Bose's cremated remains. You say the understanding between the governments of India and Japan is that if the former, that is to say the government of India, asks for the remains to be handed over, the latter, that is to say the government of Japan, will comply. In effect, you add, under this pact, Japan is diplomatically handicapped to extend direct possession of the remains to Professor Pfaff. And then you pointedly say, in this situation, the Indian government has neither requested the Japanese government to transfer the remains to it, nor has it authorized it to do so to Pfaff. What explains the Indian government's position? I'm not just talking of the Modi government, I'm talking of Indian governments from 1950 onwards. What explains their position unless it's a silent, secret determination not to let the remains come to India?
Well, first of all, what you've read out is precisely the truth. Now, let me go back a little bit. So when in 1945, Subhash Bose passed away, A, India was not an independent country. B, Japan had come under American occupation. So Japan was not entirely free either. Now, Japan becomes once again free, as it were, because the American occupation ended in 1952. So from 1952 onwards. Now, by which stage, obviously, India had become not only independent, India had also become a republic. So 1952 is when full diplomatic relations were established between India and Japan. And at that point, it was agreed, because there was uncertainty as to what should happen with the remains. It was agreed between the government of India and the government of Japan that the government of Japan would facilitate the handover of the remains to the government of India at the government of India's request. Now, that remains the case ever since. And the very fact that the government of India has been paying for the upkeep of the remains goes to show that officially the government of India has been involved in the preservation of the ashes. And in that scenario, what prevents the government of India? It is nothing but either they are very scared to do this for whatever reason. It's not their business in any case, as far as I am concerned. It is the wish of the daughter that needs to be upheld and honored.
But the interesting position that you've underlined, in a sense, is this. The government of India can request at any point in time the government of Japan to hand the remains over either to the government of India or to Anita Pfaff, and it's done neither. Meantime, for pretty close to 80 years, it's been paying for the upkeep of the remains. And my question, therefore, I'm repeating again. Is it that the government doesn't want those ashes to come to India? Because it seems as if the only thing that explains its behavior is a determination to ensure that one way or another the remains don't come to India, neither directly to the government of India nor indirectly by Anita Pfaff.
So let me cite a conversation that I had with Subramaniam Jaishankar when he was Foreign Secretary, which might give you an idea as to what the government of India's thinking is or may be. Now, he was visiting London, and the High Commissioner at the time very kindly invited me over to his residence. And so I had a chat with Jaishankar, who, by the way, was a middle-ranking officer when I visited the Indian Embassy in Tokyo in 1995 in course of my research on the subject. And Prakash Shah was then the ambassador, and if I'm not mistaken, Jaishankar reminded me something I had forgotten, that he brought a file to the ambassador's office, and I was sitting with the ambassador, and which was shown to me at that point of time. And that was basically the final report of the Japanese government on the circumstances of Subhas Chandra Bose's death. Now, that being the case, I did mention, because Jaishankar by this stage had become Foreign Secretary, so the purpose of my meeting was to impress upon him that he should impress upon the government of India. Modi had become Prime Minister by that stage, to bring the remains back, because Jaishankar was fully familiar with the situation as far as the Indian embassy's position was concerned and vis-a-vis the ashes. And so, by the way, is Hardeep Puri, because he served as an Indian diplomat at the Tokyo embassy as well. So, what do you think was the response? And he said, why do you want this thing to come back? Let it be, and that kind of thing, which I was pretty shocked by this response. Well, what are you talking about? Here is something that you need to do lawfully, legitimately. And this is your typical, very bureaucratic response. Now,
Forgive me, it's more than a bureaucratic response. It's an indication of a fairly deep reluctance to have the ashes back in India. He's putting it politely, he's putting it not upfront and boldly, but he's saying, why do you want to bother? Leave it where it is. They're happy in Tokyo, let them stay in Tokyo. That is an indication of the government's reluctance to have the ashes back.
Well, you may be absolutely right. And in fact, he cited a strange example to me. He said, a relative of his had disappeared, and after a while, they didn't bother. I mean, what kind of an example was that? So this is really the state of mind of the government of India. And here I say that previous governments did not declassify files pertaining to Subhash Bose. Narendra Modi did. And so, the logical conclusion, once the file said that A, he died as a result of a plane crash in Taipei, B, that the remains in Renkoji temple are his, what prevents Narendra Modi from moving to a logical conclusion of facilitating the transfer of ashes to India?
Now, in that article that you wrote for The Wire in May of last year, I believe it was, forgive me, August of last year, you said that Anita Pfaff has sought to discuss her wish to bring her father's remains to India with Prime Minister Modi, but Modi has not responded. Tell me more about that.
Yes, she has written letters more than once to Narendra Modi. Not once has he even acknowledged these letters, let alone provided a proper answer. So that tells you again the attitude of the government of India.
But this is bizarre
shocking.
because, as you point out, in 2017, the Modi government formally accepted that Bose had died in a plane crash in 1945. In 2022, they erected his statue in the India Gate complex, which is a particularly honored place for someone to have their statue. In earlier years, it was felt Mahatma Gandhi ought to be there. It's gone instead to Subhash Chandra Bose. So let me ask, how important is it that Bose's ashes should be back in India? How important is it to Pfaff herself as the daughter? How important is it to India that Bose's ashes should be back in India?
I think what matters is what uh, Anita Bose Pfaff thinks, because it doesn't matter what anybody else thinks. What doesn't matter what the rest of India thinks. The rest of India, we must fall in line with the wishes of his sole heir, and that is in this case Anita, and she would like the remains to return to India. Now, you refer to 2017. That's very important because an RTI reply by the government of India categorically says that he died as a result of a plane crash in Taipei on the 18th of August 1945. So again, I ask this question: what prevents the government of India from saying that, yes, you may, Professor Pfaff, go ahead, bring your father's remains to India? I would go a step further. The government of India should be proactive in facilitating and indeed bringing the remains back to India with due honor.
Let me at this point ask a question that, in a sense, has been lurking in the background of our conversation. Who are the people or who are the organizations that are opposing bringing back Bose's remains? I presume the government doesn't want to offend them by ignoring their objections. So, who are these people? Who are the organizations who don't want Bose's remains brought back?
Okay, that's a very, very good question. And historically, let me tell you this: the RSS, the Jan Sangh, now the BJP, the Forward Bloc, and a section of Bose's extended family have opposed the the transfer of the remains to India. Yes, that has been the case. Twice they have blocked it. Once in the 1950s when Nehru wanted to bring the remains back, and again in the 1990s when Prime Minister P.V. Narasimha Rao wanted to bring the remains back at the time of Bose's birth centenary in 1997.
Why are they opposed to the remains coming back?
Well, they have been under this crazy belief that he did not die as a result of the crash, that he escaped to the Soviet Union or some other cock and bull story about he having become a sadhu and things like that.
They genuinely believe that he survived, that he's alive, and therefore these remains can't be his.
Yes, exactly. They have believed this for decades and have spread disinformation and conspiracy theories for decades. And originally, by the way, the story about Subhash Bose escaping to the Soviet Union and being killed there was intended, and still is, by the way, to defame Jawaharlal Nehru. there was this absolutely nonsensical story which said that Nehru had asked Stalin to kill Bose, and Stalin did it. I mean, can anything be more absurd than that? And I went to the extent of asking the Russian archives to please provide the fullest possible information, and they sent me two categorical letters absolutely denying that Subhash Bose ever entered the Soviet Union in or after 1945.
Let me ask you the opposite question in a sense. Why isn't there a greater clamor in Bengal in particular, from where Bose comes, for his remains to be brought back to India? Why aren't fellow Bengalis calling out vociferously, bring his remains back?
Well, the answer is very simple, that Bengalis are divided on this matter. And the division is as a result of the disinformation which has taken place over 80 years. And that being the case, even the chief minister of West Bengal, Mamata Banerjee, is one of the opponents of what is the truth, which is that his remains are at Renkoji Temple. She also has been fancifully talking about some Russian angle to the story. So it's a very, very difficult position. But as I said, she has no locus standi. The government of India has no locus standi on the matter. And the only person who has rights as far as the remains are concerned is Professor Anita Pfaff.
Let me end by asking you, given the situation that prevails, what does Professor Pfaff propose to do? Is she considering a public appeal to the government of India? Maybe even a public appeal to the people of India? Or is she worried that would so seriously embarrass the government that it might be counterproductive?
She's been making public appeals for some time. In fact, she does it every year on the day of Subhash Bose's death anniversary. And I dare say she will do it again on Monday, the 18th, which is the 80th death anniversary of Bose. And she will continue to do so, make an appeal to the Indian people and request that a facilitation takes place, because this is what she'd like to see. She's now 82 years old. She believes that she would like to see this happen in her lifetime. She is fit and well, but nevertheless, her mother passed away without seeing a conclusion, a closure of the matter. She would like to do so.
Ashis Ray, thank you very much for drawing my attention to this subject and for the time you've given me. Take care. Stay safe.
Thank you, Karan.
Hi, I'm Karan Thapar. Over the last few years, I hope you've been watching my program, The Interview on the Wire. During that period, I've interviewed doctors, politicians, businessmen, scientists, authors, and even the occasional Nobel laureate. For me, it's been exciting. I hope it's been enjoyable for you. But these, as you know, are tough times, and if this program is going to remain bold, independent, and sometimes even defiant, then I think we need your support. At the end of the day, it's a truism, but editorial independence is best defended by the viewers. So if you would like this program to remain the way it is, forthright, outspoken, and interesting, then would you consider supporting us? All you have to do is to click on the description at the bottom. But more than anything else, I hope you will continue to watch The Interview. Your viewership means an awful lot to me.